Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 194, I think this will be, of the show. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews, and this week I have an author interview for you guys. I know you guys have thought that I stopped doing those. I haven't. I just haven't really working hard on other stuff, so just matter of authors wanting to do it with me. So, and Daniel Schinhofen, who's our guest today, spoilers, was nice enough to want to do this and to hang out. And so you already partner. We've talked several times before. We're right into our nice little bit. And welcome to the show, Daniel Schinhofen.
Thank you for having me, Ramon. I don't know why more people wouldn't want to do the interviews with you. I find them refreshing, upbeat, and much easier than my own long monologues that I do every month. So
I do agree that it's easier when you have a conversation to somebody than just monologuing for hours at a time. It's just easier to flow and not to have the whole burden on you as the entertainer.
Yeah, it really is, because like I know that when I'm doing the live chats, I get caught up looking at just chat, and that makes it really hard to like look at the camera and look like I'm engaging. But I'm engaging, it's just not at the camera, so I always feel bad in that regard.
No, I hear it. I think most people understand the one-man show versus a conversation, which I always enjoy conversations a little bit more. And just to acknowledge, we're doing this on Facebook Live right now, live streaming it as we're recording it as well. So we have some people in chat. 5 whole people have already joined us in the first few minutes, and that's a pretty good record for me. So we have Daniel Schinhofen, who's joined us, both in chat and on the thing. Also, Dave Wilmarth, who says, dudes, the moves, and Jamie Wood, who says, hey, in chat. So thank you everybody for joining us, and feel free to ask questions about anything we're talking about. I'll try to remember to scroll down to your comments and read them as we go along. But Daniel and I have plenty of things to talk about as well. Daniel, you've just recently finished one of your longest running series, one of the most beloved Alpha World. So how does it feel to finish an actual series, have an actual end? How does that make you feel, man?
Well, you have to remember, I have finished a series before. Last Horizon,
That is true.
The 2 books did finish, but Alpha World was 2.5 years, 8 books long, which is vastly different than like a year and a half and 2 books long.
Yeah.
So it's bittersweet. I mean, 2.5 years with the characters going on the journey and sharing it with people, and now it's done. That sense of finality still hits.
Good. And I'm curious, like, is it actual finality or is it just a pause in the journey of your characters? I've heard things from multiple people, so I'm like, okay, let's just ask Daniel.
As I always said, the story of Alpha World at this point is over, and whether or not there will ever be a Delta World was really dependent on how Alpha World 8 ended.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't quite been a month yet, so I'm not going to spoil that with answers.
Okay, so here, folks, it depends on how sales go. So go buy multiple copies of his books, the ebooks, the audiobooks. Do you do print copies?
Alpha World, the first 4 books need a re-edit before I decide to publish them as physical copies. So I will get there. Yeah. I will get there eventually, but they're not out yet.
So here, your opportunity to just print out actual physical copies for yourself, bind them, and he will sign them if you ever bring them. He's more than happy to do so at cons.
That would be very odd. Somebody bringing me a 3-ring binder with my stuff printed out.
Here's your stuff, man. Yeah, can you sign it for me? Yeah, it's not quite the sign my boobs, but it's still fun to ask. Yeah.
Can I have the second one instead?
I've only gotten that request from guys though, so I'm like, oh, that's I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And, Dragon Con or whatever.
Well, yeah, you gotta get the penmanship good. This way, when the other side happens, you're ready for it.
Yeah. Everything else is a practice run. Folks in chat room are saying, Dave Schinhofen, you are the most engaging person. Jamie Wood says it was a satisfying ending, managed to tie up the threads nicely. So I actually agree. I think the last book in your series was a lot of tying up of stuff. And you kind of started it like 2 books prior to that, I think. In like trying to get things rolling in the first place, but the last book just said, yep, everything I think of, like, yep, tied up. That one is like sometimes like, oh yeah, that's definitely a tie up, but at least he finished it. So yeah.
There's what is that? I mean, when you get to 8 books long, there are a lot of threads that can just be sitting out there waiting for you. And I did not tie up everything.
Oh no, I'm sure
But
your fans have found things.
I tied up the threads that had a direct impact for my main characters. But for some things, because some people were, I did get a message from somebody who was upset that I didn't give a resolution to one quest line that had been thrown out. And I was like, well, the main characters aren't around for it, so it doesn't impact them. I don't need to show that.
Right. And that kind of definitely makes sense in the terms of MMO, in that you sometimes get, as an MMO player, a ton of quests and then you out level them and you don't ever finish some of them because it's pointless. Or like you've moved on to bigger and better things. And sometimes you have a quest log from like when you're level 60, quest from like level 2 still. Like, oh, I don't really care about those anymore.
Nah, I normally have a tendency to finish them all,
Do you?
even if I've out leveled them.
You're a completionist?
I'm not a full completionist, but I do have what is it? CDO, which is like OCD but slightly worse.
Oh, okay. So you have
So
completionist tendencies?
I have completionist tendencies,
Yeah.
but they're only in some places. Like when games have a tendency to include like one sub game where you have to go and collect a whole lot of stuff. I normally don't get so involved in those because they're not story based. They're just, hey, here, go waste some more time.
Okay. Yeah. That kind of makes sense. But you like to complete the stuff that's related even tangentially to the main storyline or to the cast of characters, like side stories for like characters maybe.
Yeah, it's, any of the quest lines, side quests, main quests, anything that has a really important backing to it. There have been few and far between mini games, and 90+% of the RPGs I've played that I've actually gone like wild over. The last one I could think of was Gwent in Witcher 3.
That's the exact term I was thinking. Like, he's going to say Gwent. And I was wondering, I was going to ask you, like, did you ever play Witcher 3 and how did you do all those side quests? Because that game is a lot of side quests. Like the main storyline is.
And I ran the entire map, sir. The map was cleared when I finished.
Well, see, there you go. That does answered. Dave Wilmar says you tied up Skippy, but not to his satisfaction. I won't use all the words he's using. If you're reading in the video, you can see what he actually said.
Well, Dave, I hate to point these things out to you, but if everything happened to your satisfaction, there would be a lot of unsolved murders. So I can't condone you having complete satisfaction, sir.
Yes, if they are completely satisfied, then they don't usually buy the next book or the next series anyway. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Always keep wanting more.
Skippy had a lot of hate.
He did. I actually really liked his.
There are a lot of threads dedicated to how much people hate that man.
Good.
So.
Well, that's the point, right? I actually really like the side story that you did with Skippy in like the short story collection.
Oh yeah,
that was really nice. I was like, oh, this is like a nice little backstory. I was always curious, like, what was he doing in this little time frame that he just suddenly pops up with this like villain motif? I was like, oh well, there you go. There's a whole explanation in the side story collection that you did for the Alpha World series.
I liked the only bad part about the side stories was completely underperformed everything I've ever attempted. So me doing side stories again is probably going to be years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do it, it'll be just oh, hey, by the way, this is a fun thing that I did, and not so much a hey, I wonder if people will actually like this, because they didn't care for those short stories.
They were not. I liked some of them.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, those short stories by and large were written for. I had a tier on Patreon for months that I would write a short story based on the characters that the person who pledged to that tier could choose. So all of those short stories, well, 90% of those short stories came from that.
Really? Is that what that happened?
Yeah, the Into the Deadlands was actually for a I can't think what it's called, an anthology that another author was putting together, and that anthology completely broke. So I took the story and I kept it because I liked what I did with it, and I put it up on Patreon for them. And then when I decided I was gonna push this, I'm like, well, it's the longest. It's like 50. I think it's 50 pages in Word. It's a decent sized little like small novella.
It is, yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I
liked that one.
When I read it, I thought, oh, are these just like side characters he's like testing about playing around with, making them bigger characters in the main series, and he changed his mind? I wasn't sure how that actually progressed, but now we have answers. The Patreon encouraged you and paid you to create little side stories for these guys. I've never thought of doing that particular reward, to be honest.
It was. I stopped doing it, and the reason why is because it took enough time and effort away from my other writing that it felt like I wasn't producing what I wanted to.
Right. Can I ask like
So
what tier of Patreon support there? Because I would be like $50 a month. Yeah, I'll totally write you a 50-word short story or something.
that was well, the short stories were varied on when I thought the story was done. So I never gave it a definitive length. But the tier I think was $250 at the time.
$250, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome. I think my top tier is like 20. And
Well,
yeah.
my top tier now is 10. So
Oh, okay. So you dropped it from $250 because people were paying it?
yeah, there was one backer, a complete super fan, who wanted a little more in depth and side stories, and they were all. I mean, at that point, I had 2 or 3 series out by the time I stopped, and that's all he ever wanted was more Alpha World content. So
Okay. So you're kind of just writing for one guy at that point, one guy or person.
well, and
Yeah.
all the Patreon got it. He got it a week before everybody else. Then
Oh, okay. So,
my Patreon backers got it, and then I had enough of them. I was like, they're all in there. Let's go ahead and put them up
oh,
for
so it was
those
also
people
just
who
like
want a
free
little more
content, though.
content.
Okay. So we go,
Yeah.
yeah, that's nice. Just kind of free money at that point.
Well, it was just enough for, in my point of view, to cover the amount of time I had to put into writing them.
Right.
With that and the editing, since they were edited as well.
Oh, okay.
So basically, it was just enough to help cover costs of them being produced.
Oh, so no audiobooks then for your short story collection then?
Actually, no, that short story is being produced by Podium.
Oh, are they? So do they get everything from the Alpha World series?
Well, that was not included.
Right.
But when I produced it, and I mentioned it to my contact there, they said they could line Burkrod up so at least the voices then would stay consistent. And I went, okay, I'll sign over the rights to the first NPC Lives book because I'm very well, like I said, might eventually get back to doing other short stories.
Right.
Compilation, and if I do, then NPC Lives is going to be my series for that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily from the Alpha World series. It could be from anything else. I mean, you have plenty of other side characters and other stories that people enjoy and love, and you could even bring in other, obviously, authors to write their own things. Although I haven't seen a lot of those do well either. Like short stories are hard to sell, I think, in our genre, just because people expect longer content with like more detail about game mechanics and things.
The only way they're going to do well is one if the authors are decently well established,
right?
And they're using at least good side characters from their main series.
Right.
In that regard, it might, because at least it's a little taste of something. But by and large, it doesn't give you a lot. It does not give you a lot of time to expand upon a gaming world.
Right.
So it has to be something that is existent.
Correct. So people already have a basis for the understanding of the game mechanics, and you don't have to delve into them necessarily. Although I've read some short stories that do efficiently establish game mechanics, or at least enough that you're already familiar with them, like the regular like strength, stack, constitution kind of stuff, where you don't have to do a ton of explanation. I've seen a few of those that were done well, but I think I feel like I'm a minority in that I enjoy short stories, and that I'm okay with them. Mostly because I can read a lot of short stories and put them on the podcast, as opposed to like one 500-page novel, which might take me like a week.
Oh, please. One 500-page novel does not take you a week, sir.
Okay, it takes like a full
day. One 500-page novel takes you a day.
Yeah, but that's still
Otherwise,
that's a good section of time. Yeah.
You would never be able to review 4 to 8 books a week if a 500-page book took you that long.
I think it's weird that I think a 500-page novel is not necessarily the highest page count I read on a regular basis. So I'm like, yeah, that's definitely our genre, though. Dave Wilmar says,
yeah, especially our genre.
Dave says he liked your side stories. One of them caused an attack from an onion cutting ninja. So,
I'm very proud of my onion cutting ninjas. They've done a lot for me, and all I have to do is supply them with books, so it works.
Oh, there you go. So congratulations on that. And again, go check out a short story collection, folks. NPC Lives. Is it Lives or Lives?
It's Lives.
Lives. Okay, NPC Lives, number 1. So we've talked a little bit about Alpha World, the entire series. What were some of the challenges for writing such a long series, in your opinion, now that you're all done?
The only real challenge I had with Alpha World was, since it was it was a game and not a game-like world, and it was something that devs were taking a part in, which you see in the first couple books when I had patch notes,
Right.
was making sure that the mechanics were always consistent, and then having to use those same mechanics but scaled up for something like the end raid, so things would work and not break, and that would be believable as an MMO, and not just from a this is an amazing story standpoint.
Right. Okay. That does kind of make sense. The same way that you would have complications in creating your own MMO and creating content that's continually entertaining for like multiple years and extensions. It seems like a very similar challenge in that respect. If you could do it over, would you have like put it in a fantasy RPG world instead? Would that have been easier for you?
I think something slightly more freeform
Right.
would have made it much easier. But at the time, it was okay. The basis of the story only works because he is in a virtual game. He's in a virtual world that is rigidly regimented. Could I have changed that slightly? Probably, but at that point, I think the flavor of the story changes as well.
Okay. Would there anything else that you would have done differently if you did it over?
That I would have done differently, no. When I originally plotted out the story, though, Albert and Stacia were supposed to get together as a couple, and Fluff and Karen were supposed to get together as a couple. I did not plan for the polyamorous relationship. It just happened.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Like, wait, didn't the first two characters actually get involved? I see what you mean, though. Everybody getting together. So how did that just magically happen then? Like, did the characters speak to you in a dream?
My characters always do what they freaking want, which makes it very difficult sometimes to pull them back onto tangent.
Right.
And with the basis of the backgrounds for the characters, especially Fluff, it just got to the point where if I had continued down what I had set out originally, it would have broken her more instead of helped.
Well, I'm very happy you didn't break Fluff.
And at the same time, having more love doesn't hurt. So I accepted the fact that the book, especially with a succubus being involved, could go in that direction, and that the main character should be hesitant about it, but eventually accept it. So it worked out, but it wasn't planned from the very beginning.
Oh, that's interesting to know. I genuinely thought that was always the path it was going to go from it. So, but that's interesting.
No, which is why I laugh when I've had people complain that it happened. I only kind of guide the characters. I can't beat them with a stick and force them into path. If I do, then the book is going to be obviously railroaded, and nobody's going to enjoy that as much.
Oh no, I was thinking beating with the stick. Oh, that's the other series. Yeah.
Well, no, that's still also Stacia. So.
Okay. So yeah, those are nice insights. So that's kind of the only thing you would modify about the series potentially. What were some of the favorite moments for you or from readers potentially, I think, in the series?
I'm actually running a contest on Facebook, Discord, and Patreon right now that touches on that. Favorite book, favorite moment. Not just for my contest, it's not just Alpha World, though. It's any of my series. But Alpha World, the biggest recurring thing that I've seen are Fluff's history and coming to terms with it, and Albert's history and coming to terms with it. Those are very big moments. There are people who've contacted me because they had to set the book down for a week or two because it touched on things they've experienced, and it brought up pain or anger, and they had to step away. And then they've come back to it, and they continued on. But those two moments or storylines within the world itself are the ones I've gotten the most feedback from.
No, I absolutely agree. I think I was talking to James Hunter the other day at a convention in Las Vegas, and he was like, "Yeah, I've never read Daniel Schinhofen stuff. I'm not sure if it's for me." I was like, "No, man, there's some amazingly touching emotional moments that will just make you cry and break down." Yeah, there's some adult content, but it's a minor part of the story. Like the big moments in the story are just psychologically based when they're exploring memories and each other's past and how everybody's broken and how their pieces fit together to make each other whole. And it was just like an amazing experience. And I was like, yeah, it's something I think that is lost for people who just look at like the minor amount of sexual content, like how much other amazing stuff is in the series. And that, I mean, I'm not judging anybody, but at the same time, I understand where they're coming from, but I also know that I've read it. The stuff that's amazing there so far outweighs like even like the relatively minor sexual content that is in there.
Well, I remember that my one 8-star review came because of those moments, the dream walking, actually showing the healing process for the characters, and of course, like you said, the flip side, the little bit of adult content that is in there is what gets me the most flack.
It is every book. I've always like come to laugh at your disclaimer that you put in there, like, yep, there's still some adult sexual content and polyamory and some adult themes in there. It's a minor part of the book, but here it is, 8 books in. I still have to give a warning because people don't. They've stuck with it this long, but apparently they still need the reminder that it exists.
I understand that where it can upset some people, and that's fine if that's what drives them away from the book. The only time I get upset about it is when someone takes what is minor content and then lies and says, "Oh, it's 50% of the book," or "Oh my God, it's 90% of the book." That's what drives me up the wall, because it's obviously a small point. It's a small portion of the book, and most of Alpha World is fade to black anyway.
It is.
So.
Yeah, no, but I understand what they're saying, that it does stand out in their minds. If I was the type of person who actually tracked percentages, I would also feel like it's a bigger section of the novel than it is because it does stand out. But when I actually track it, I was like, oh no, this is like less than 10% every time, just because it's a big, red flag to me and it makes me blush. Doesn't mean that it's actually a large part of the content of the actual story, but I understand how it stands out to people sometimes.
Well, I find that funny because the most adult content I've ever had in any of my books is in Apocalypse Gates, obviously.
Yeah.
And even then, I haven't broken 11% in any one book. But like you said, it's what raises red flags, and people go, "Oh my God, this book is all smut." It's not.
It's not. No, it's very, very little, if any, sometimes in some books. Depends on the book. But yeah.
It does depend on the book.
It does depend on the books. Okay, so adult content has been addressed. Dave Wilmar says he would pay to see Kitty do a tower defense back there behind you. And he says he has to go. So sorry, buddy. Thanks for hanging out, Dave Wilmar, and for chatting and leaving questions. Anybody else who happens to be watching live in any group, feel free to comment about your favorite moments in Alpha World series or things you just want to ask Daniel Schinhofen or myself. Again, we're happy to take comments and read them on the air. So thanks.
I am very, very open to taking questions. If anybody's seen any of my monthly live chats, they know that's honest.
That's right, folks. So take whatever you give them.
Especially if you pay first.
Yes.
Pay first. I'm more than willing.
That's always a thing to say. My Patreon is here. Make sure that PayPal clears, and then we can go do that stuff. Okay. So we talked about Alpha World quite a bit. The things you like, the things you might have changed. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to do? Talk about Alpha World specifically before we move on to your new stuff that's coming out soon?
Alpha World specifically.
Yeah.
I've had, of course, I've fielded all the questions about whether or not there's ever going to be a Delta World. Yeah. And my answer to that is read the author's note at the back of book 8. Mm-hmm. I address it. Other than that, I've had other people ask me if I'm going to spin any side stories off for like Merrill and Jerry Sue, or Iron Hand and Legolas, or any of the other more prominent side characters that you see repeatedly in the series. And my answer is not right now, because I have dozens of other types of stories I would like to write, and I need to at least give them a chance to see if they're accepted first.
Right, see if they have legs before you go back to a series that you've kind of already finished off to a degree. No, that makes sense. I think most writers feel the same way at some point when you're writing a long series. Like, sometimes I need breaks, but I think you've definitely been the most dedicated to actually completing those novels in those series. You have 2 finished series. I have 0 finished series, and I think most authors don't have finished series. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's you work really hard to get those books out on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'd like my series at the moment is a 4 book rotation. So at the moment it's AG, Binding Words, the next new series, which is coming out soon, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then I have an open spot that I'm going to use to write one-offs, or maybe go back and touch on like Last Horizon characters, or maybe I'll go back and do a side story like people have asked, or I'll throw a first book of a different series out there just to see if it gains any traction.
Right.
To make a note that, okay, this will be the next series when one of my other ones wraps up or comes to a point where I feel okay breaking it off.
Right. Something with a completed arc, at least. Maybe it's not the end of the series, but the end of like a major arc story. Yeah. I kind of feel the same, but that's why I wrote Adventures of Terror 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to put a pause on that one for a while because that major arc finished. So even though the series is done, I feel comfortable pausing it for the same reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have it harder because you also still spend all your time doing things like this and the reviews, and you also have a small child that to take care of, and you have a lot of other demands of your time, sir.
Well, thank you for that. But yeah, it's still dedication. I think of myself as a podcaster first and then as an author, even though the author stuff is what pays the bills. And I think mostly because
I've enjoyed your work, so
you.
I just want to say that I wish you were more of an author first and a podcaster second.
Yep.
But that's just me. I just enjoy your stuff, even though I've told you repeatedly that I'm not a big young adult fan.
Yeah, you're the author who told me.
I still read your stuff when it comes out because I know that it's going to be at least good young adult.
Well,
as opposed to normal young adult, which I'd rather tear my eyes out than read.
Right. Mine's very mature young adult, I guess. MYA. I don't know. That's a subgenre of the young adult section. But yeah, Daniel Schinhofen folks.
I thought mature young adult was Aileron.
Oh, that could be the case. I won't poke that one anymore. But yeah, Daniel Schinhofen folks, and it was the first author who helped me to realize that I'm a young adult writer apparently because of when my characters are, how they're, coming of age stories a lot of time. Like my characters are younger, like adults always, like barely 18 or like early 20s. I have one series that it's a Planet Bound where he's like a married guy, but apparently he's still a young adult, and how he acts, which I'm like, yeah, that's kind of me on the whole. I'm still a young adult at heart, I think, which is why my characters come off the same way, which I'm okay with. It took me a few months to be okay with it. But yeah, I'm okay with like being classified in that, I guess.
There's nothing wrong with being young at heart. I'm still young mentally, so it's fine.
Well, thank you very much. Let's see. Matt Parrish says plans for the next series. We'll be talking about in a second. Oh look, my wife just joined. That's nice. Dave Omar says my book, Ramon's books rocks. I've read them all. I think he means. So might as well talk about the next book in your series. We actually have a picture here for the folks who are watching the live stream. It's going to be out on October the 15th, I believe.
October 15th is the release date I'm shooting for.
It's called The Resurrection Quest, a module for first level characters, Greenway Goblins, voted best starter module. So tell me about this.
The series is Resurrection Quest. Mm-hmm. The first book is Greenway's Goblins. And considering that the series is a throwback to like tabletop gaming, and that's the setting for the series, we went for a mock-up cover, like a module cover for the old school D&D type stuff, right, to kind of evoke the fact that it is more of a tabletop-esque series and it's not a virtual game or that kind of thing.
Right.
And then one of my editors mentioned maybe there should be a seal on there, and we mocked up best starter module.
Oh, I definitely got those vibes from all those words that you used in the cover art. So it's going to be more tabletop-esque. Kind of how do you describe that then? As opposed to like the MMO version of it or the RPG Fantasy World version of it, how are you differentiating this story since you're saying specifically, it's more tabletop-esque?
Well, there's a very big difference in mechanics if you look from tabletop gaming to MMO gaming. MMO gaming, your cooldowns are fast. They're up almost all the time. Your bigger spells might take 10, 15 seconds to refresh, but it's nothing groundbreaking. And your world-breaking mechanics, Imp Storm from Alpha World, for instance, has like a 30-minute cooldown. But for tabletop gaming, most of your active abilities that you get are, use once or twice a day, or maybe once or twice a rest period. So the idea of how you approach combat then changes, especially for your magic users, because you go from mana pool that will refresh in MMOs to a tabletop game where you get X amount of spells per day. Use them wisely.
Right,
So
or
that
like prolonged rest or whatever, right?
or yeah, prolonged. So there's a huge difference in how you if you're thinking about the systems, how players react to certain situations because of, like I said, oh, I'm going to sit down and drink some water and have a fruity Oaty bar, and I'm good to go for the next combat, as opposed to tabletop where, okay, guys, we're going to need to sit here for at least an hour and bandage these wounds up. The fun part about this series is there is still no magical healing even in this tabletop setting. So things are going to be bloody.
That is an interesting choice then. Because if you're going to make magic a rare resource, why not make healing magic a rare resource as well? Instead, you decided specifically to cut it out.
Because if you have healing in any tabletop game, and I don't know how much tabletop you've played, Ramon.
I don't think it's your experience as a DM, because you do DM some games, right?
I DM and I game. So you still kind of get into the mindset of, it's okay, our cleric is here, he has enough magic, we can keep going. As opposed to, okay, guys, hang on, before we jump into this next fight, let's regroup, let's think about it. It becomes a lot more deadly and dangerous. There is still types of healing that will work in the system, but there are no clerics, there are no divine spells per se. There is no, cure wounds or mass res or any of that stuff. That's all removed from the system.
So we should expect more character deaths then.
Well, the series name is Resurrection Quest, Ramon.
Oh, okay. Well, there goes your giant hint, Ramon. So is there permadeath in this story? I mean, in this world?
There is. I'll give it away because it's in the first couple of chapters. There is, if the world lines up like the players think it does,
right,
then there should be resurrection magic, but it's like top tier magic.
Right.
It's like, you're changing the foundations of the world magic. So they think that it's available. So that is what the series is they're trying to get to that point.
That's their big, series arc goal.
That is the one of the, it's a co-joined goal by and large, but that is one of the two things that is going to push them into being the adventurers and going out and risking their lives all the fucking time.
Okay, so
pardon my language, by the way.
No, it's fine. We're all adults here, folks. We'll put a disclaimer in the meeting saying cursing adults in this podcast. Okay, so that sounds interesting. So is this now? Tell me if you don't want to tell me, obviously, but so is this going to be transported to a tabletop universe, or is it really like an RPG universe where the RPG mechanics are tabletop-like?
The story starts out with a group of long time acquaintance / friends who are gathering to play a brand new tabletop game that has come out.
Okay.
And plot mechanic device happens, and they are taken from around the table and are suddenly on a road and in the bodies of the first level characters they had created to play the game.
Okay, so very much in line with...
They are transported to another world where the world mostly functions like the brand new game they were just going to start playing.
Mostly functions. So there is a differences then, obviously.
There are some differences. Okay,
because in my brain, I'm comparing it to other novels where I've read that are like this, where I'm like, Critical Failures, Monster Maces, and I forget the last one is something out with big boobs or something. Monsters, Maces, and Magic, I think. Well, the character in the novel has, and anyways, that's one of the things. But yeah, so like they have similar premise, like being trapped in the game, being sucked in for some reason, or somebody sending them there. So I figured it was going to be something like that. It's a good start, especially because you're kind of justifying how these characters are thinking as gamers, and their decision making properties, but also because it's a new game to them, how all those experiences aren't always going to line up, and there's still room for surprises, but also the same kind of like gamer mentality of like power gaming or whatever different kind of gamers you have in that system there. So it sounds like it could potentially be really, really fun.
Yeah, well, the main characters are based on past and present friends, so it was very easy to know how those characters are going to react in certain situations.
Hmm.
Even if I ask the question, okay, how does Jerry react in this situation? Because that's how this guy's going to react.
Right.
Even though he's not a broken person anymore, because in the world he's in now, he's perfectly healthy. He's still probably going to have the same mentality, but he's going to also be trying to game the system to a degree. Okay, we kind of know how this works,
Hmm.
so maybe we should approach it in this way because that's how gaming works. But is it really going to work here? There's going to be a lot of those moments that I'm looking for. It's not this series is not going to be jokey like Bevins.
Right. Oh
Bevins
no,
is
Bevan's
Bevins is silly, and I love the hell out
it's
of it.
very silly. I actually got a chance to meet Robert Bevan. He did a convention in Las Vegas, which is
Mhm.
where we had dinner. But it was really nice to just chat with him and talk to him for a little bit because I love his series. Really fun. But yeah, that's what this reminded me of. And yeah. So I could actually see the risk reward scenarios, even as like I'm practically like thinking of the game in my head, and I'm like, yeah, what would I do as that character? Which is always a good sign for me when you can already engage me in your story and I haven't even read it. I'm like, oh, that's a good sign. To me at
Well,
least.
a lot of the stories I can think of in this vein, Caverns and Creatures, Dan the Barbarian,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
like you
just
said,
things like that. Yeah.
the other one, they all still have a very jokey quality to them by and large,
Okay.
and mine will have moments of that, but it's still also very dark.
Right.
One of the three main characters is a functional sociopath, so when you need something done and you know you probably shouldn't do it, and like I have some chapters up on Patreon, and one of my Patreons said, I really don't like this character right now because he did X, and I went, you're not supposed to like him. He's a
Yeah.
sociopath.
Yeah.
So there are very distinct personalities. It's going to be very dark, and it'll be in my warning blurb that this has adult situations, but not those adult situations because it's three main male characters in a vast step away from what people think of me as. There is
Again,
no romance.
I wouldn't judge you.
There
It's
is
okay.
no harem. So this series will have no romance and no harem planned at the very least. And if they do, it'll be with somebody who's in that world and not each other. So get that thought out of your head. I know who you are.
Well, I was thinking reverse harem. I was like, okay, that seems fun. I mean, that'd be the satisfied different segment of the reader population.
So
We're going to read some comments from the chat room. Janet Curl says, hey, and that she loves your books. She enjoyed your books, Daniel. Cesar Garcia says he loves your books as well. And Jamie Wood actually asked, why not healing potions, going back to our short discussion about healing in this new series. Healing potions, no healing spells, we've already established, but healing potions.
I have not touched on them at
Okay.
this point.
Yeah.
But like I said, there are still ways of healing to be done
Mm-hmm.
because like there's no. I do not have it set out to where you see X hit points and X things. There are character sheets that'll be at the back of the book,
Right.
but there's no set hit points. I have my stuff in front of me when I write, and I keep track of everything very carefully. So if the guy gets stabbed by a spear, okay, that should take this much. Oh, he's really wounded now. I need to make sure that's reflected in the story. So you're not going to see hard, crunchy numbers in that regard, but the mechanics are still very much active.
Okay.
So there will be moments where healing. One of the main characters has a physical class. He's a brawler. He fights barehanded, unarmored. He gets one of his abilities is the fact that when he gets wounded, the ability will kick in and heal him to a certain amount.
Right. I figure like
So
10%.
there is some healing, but it's not. Oh, by the way, cleric, throw me another cure light, buddy.
Right.
So there is a moment of yes, we have to be careful, but you also at least get those moments of okay, we can be a little crazy. This plan will work.
Okay. So I guess this is my LitRPG question. Like, do the characters in the story have access to their RPG mechanics? So like the character sheets and stuff?
The characters cannot. I don't.
Because I'm like,
I have to ask my editor actually.
because I'm like, wait, is this?
I wrote
yeah.
this book like 4 books ago now.
Okay.
So hang on. Do they have access to their character sheets?
Because I feel like maybe when they level up
I
or
know
something.
they remember stuff. Yeah, that's what I thought. So no, they don't actually see their character sheets. They are basing it off of what they remember their character sheets looking like
Yeah.
before they ended up on that world.
Okay. So it's going to feel more like a fantasy,
Yeah,
Portal Fantasy shortish.
it's a Portal fantasy, but
Yeah.
the mechanics, especially like when the mage is talking about, guys, I only have so much more energy I can use this day, and it's a set number. He knows what it is.
Right.
So there's still those mechanics. They're just hidden behind a layer of story.
Okay.
And at the back of it, I will end up with their character sheets that show stats and abilities. So those people who really want to like look at some of the mechanics have a chance to really sit down and study things. But there's no like hit points listed on that sheet, for
Right,
instance,
right.
because that's still a very fluid storytelling device.
Okay. I'll have to see I'm not sure how I feel about that now, because I'm like, one of the characteristics is that those game mechanics aren't hidden away in the story. You know what I mean? So I'm like, even if it was just along the lines of, and this is speaking as a reader, like, even though I only saw the character sheets when they leveled up, and then they could make their decisions and select their spells or their new abilities or whatever. I think that would probably still satisfy lit RPG readers.
I
You know what
don't
I
know
mean?
if it would satisfy lit RPG readers. It would. I think game lit readers will be fine
Yeah,
with
they'll
it.
be fine with it.
But lit RPG readers normally want a much crunchier
No,
version,
yeah,
I
yeah.
find.
It wouldn't
So
satisfy the people like super crunchy numbers, but at least if you could see like their actual progress as levels continue on, like each time they level, that would still show that RPG progress, and like their ability to like metagame a little bit would be heightened in the fact that they can finally see numbers, even if it was only for like the day that they level. You know what I mean?
the they
Yeah.
the leveling is touched on near the end of the book.
Right.
And like I said, the character sheets will reflect new stats at the very end. So like they're level 1 at the start, you don't see character sheets. They talk about all their stuff, but you don't see character sheets. But at the end of it, when they've leveled, now there are character sheets at the back of it. So you can, if you really wanted to, you can go back and look and compare, as it were, because there are choices. I've set out the system and I know exactly what it is, but it's a very flexible system. So it's going to be fun for especially people who want to try to metagame ahead of my stories,
Right.
where they think something is going compared to where I know it's going is going to be very interesting.
Okay. I'll have to wait to see to read it. So okay. Well, thank you for sharing about your new story. That's coming in October the 14th. I'll drop a picture for people who want to look at the cover art. I don't believe you have a pre-order up. It's just like you plan to release it on the 15th.
I don't normally do pre-orders because I try to get them. I normally try to push them out the door as soon as they're ready.
Right.
Because with a pre-order, you're stuck at least 3 days back behind a pre-order.
Yeah.
I mean, because you know how KDP works.
Yes.
So beta readings in progress. It'll end in a couple of days, and then it goes back to my proofer for 5-6 days, and then my compiler puts it all together in actual format, so I can upload it. So the 15th, maybe a day or two sooner. That's also the nice thing, is it gives me the chance to like kick things out a day or two sooner if it happens. But it should be the 15th, if not before. And the 15th, of course, is when I'm holding my next live chat. So if it does come out on the 15th, those people who go to the live chat will have a chance of picking up a free book when I, give things away.
And you do that quite often. So
I give away prizes every live chat because it's my way of giving back to the fans.
yeah.
Whether it's, a T-shirt or a nifty little pen or ebook or audiobooks for the few that I get. Because like you've done all your books through ACX and through a narrator. And I've done, like, Alpha World was through Podium, and Last Horizons was through Tantor. I get no audio codes for those, so I can't give those books away.
Right.
So at the moment, I only got Apocalypse Gates and Binding Words I can give out codes to. And so the people who are maybe wondering if they watch this later, Podium has the rights to Resurrection Quest. I just went ahead and signed off with them because I couldn't lock up the narrator of choice I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead and signed off with them because then it's one less thing I have to take care of. I don't have to worry about audio proofing it. I don't have to worry about it being done or anything else. I just hand it off and, take what they give me.
Right. And that's a lot easier for you as an author, and not have to worry about the audio side of things for some projects when you're on strict deadlines anyway. So I absolutely understand that. decision? Were you trying to get Andy?
Yeah. Yeah, I always Andy is my first choice for narrator all the time.
Yeah.
And she had when I had asked her about it, she had just finished up The Wandering Inn and she's still backlogged
Yeah.
because of The Wandering Inn. And she's like, "Well, I don't really have the time and it's 3 male main characters and she didn't think that she could do like the bang up job she always does. I don't know why she's worried about it. She'd kill it." But she declined, much to my eternal sadness.
Sorry.
So I went ahead and just handed it over to Podium. I basically took my ball and went home.
You're like, fine. I'm just gonna use the Podium. They'll take care of it all. Sad. Yeah, she good for her that she's busy. She just putting whoever's doing The Wanderer decided to do the second volume of that as well. So that's another, whatever 30 hours of audiobook.
It's like 60 or 70 hours of audiobook. Yeah. She mentioned it. It's freaking insane. Because I believe who is it? Pirate
Ella? Yeah.
Went through Podium, and Podium got her to do the narration. So I mean, the first one was 30-something hours.
It's a long
right?
novel. I don't think they've actually published volume 2 on Amazon yet. So I'm like, oh, that'd be curious.
So the second volume audiobook though is like double the length.
Yeah.
And for those people who don't understand audiobooks, each hour of finished audio is like 4 to 6 hours of unfinished work.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about that, we'll say 30 hours of finished audiobook was like 180 hours of recording and stuff that went into it.
Right.
And if you are doing narration, you're only doing like 4 to 6 hours a day at the most because you need to rest your throat.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a lot of time. Now you're going to take and double that. I said, Andy, so you're booked all next year then, huh?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I understand, but it's also like some good steady work for her. Plus, it pushes up her reputation because she's doing a Podium one, and they do a lot of nice press work for the books that they're using. So I'm like, yeah, good for her. I think a lot her prominence as a narrator really popped up even more when she got that award at the Here Now Festival with Matt Dinniman for like the best, I forget what it was, fantasy LitRPG story or something. But it's like, yeah, it was really good. Yeah. So it's like,
for Hobgoblin Riot?
Yeah, for Hobgoblin Riot. So I was like, yeah, good for her. And like, she does really good work. So I'm happy that she's so busy that she has to turn down jobs, unfortunately. I mean,
she's amazing. She's like I said, she's my go-to narrator. If I could lock her up in a room and just make her narrate my books, I would.
Yeah.
I think Rand has also said that though. So it'd be like a knife fight between me and Rand Rand's got much more rabid fans than I do, so I wouldn't survive. So I'm also kind of glad she doesn't let one of us try to do that because that would be horrible.
No, it's good for her. I'm glad she's so popular. My narrator also does really well, so I'm not. So if she's listening, I like you too. I stuck with you, so there you go. No offense.
Smooth that bridge. That bridge.
Yeah, suddenly my phone calls and emails are returned. I'm like, wait, no. Okay, so yeah, that's fun. So talked about that, and I think the last thing you want to make sure we talked about was your 3-year anniversary of writing. Is that the case?
It was yesterday. 3 years published.
Okay.
Was October the 3rd. And I'm like I said, I'm currently doing giveaways on all the different platforms where I can contact people and give things away because this doesn't happen. I'm not a 3-year published author without fan support.
Yeah.
So I'm giving away the main prize on all 3 platforms is your name in a book. So whether that's a quick cameo appearance or a dedicated support character, I will figure out once I talk to the person and I make sure that I have in writing that I have their approval to use them in abusive and unnice ways.
Right.
And then I have 2 get runner-up prizes for each of those as well, which are mystery prizes, which might be a shirt, might be an audio code, might be a AC pen, or the new Binding Words pens, which I don't have one on my desk of at the moment. So if you've seen my Binding Words logo, which is the Celtic knotwork with the Binding Words wrapped in chains, I had that made up as an actual pen instead of the magnets because the magnets are a pain in the ass.
I thought that was an unusual choice. Yeah.
I have a lot of gifts that I get to give away, so I'm gonna be doing those. Well, then again, one of the mystery prizes might also be somebody's name in a book. I'm a very mercurial individual and might change my mind on a whim.
And again, if people want to enter those contests, what were the 3 platforms and what were the terms of that contest?
Facebook, Discord and Patreon, and the terms of it are basically which book, which scene in which book spoke to you the most. So, like I said, I've had a lot of Fluff's memories and Albert's memories, for instance, because those are very touching moments. But I've also had comments for AG. I've had comments for Binding Words. So it's across the spectrum. I've even had a comment for Last Horizons. One of my dedicated Last Horizons fans has joined the fray too. So you people are gonna have your work cut out for you.
I could definitely see that for like that last scene, some of the last scenes in that series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But 3 years published. I had finished writing the first book like a year before it was published, because my girlfriend was editing it for me, and she didn't know what she was doing, and I didn't know what I was doing. And eventually we got to the point where she's just like, yeah, here, it's done. Publish it. Go away. And, I had the first royalty check that came in 2 months later, and it was like one of those, people actually enjoyed this, and I got money for it. Hon, we need to talk.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
And I thought it would be I always thought, okay, this will be, it's a hobby that I loved. I thought, okay, it'll be something I do on the side. And then Alpha World, when I published the first book of Alpha World, and it was stupidly popular, in my opinion. I wasn't expecting anything near the reaction it got. And 2-3 books into that, eventually I looked at it and go, well, if I take an average of everything, and I look at that over a 12-month period, that's more or less what I'm making at my other job. So I could theoretically pay all my bills by just being a writer. And I waffled on that for a long while. And eventually it got to the point where I was able to convince my girlfriend. I had to sit down and work out the math and be like, okay, so this is what our average make should be, and this is what all of our bills are. So theoretically, as you can see, as long as no quantum conversion happens, we should be fine. As long as everybody doesn't abandon me.
Yeah, I feel like every author has had to have that conversation with their significant other when they're trying to convince them to let them go full time. I was like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember having that same conversation with my wife. Like, here's the math. I'm making twice to 2 or 3 times what I'm making as a janitor and like a substitute teacher. So this is probably going to work out well for us. And we still have your job in case like things just like really go downhill. We still have income coming in. So,
did you feel like a child going to your parent then going, please?
Oh, I had a whole like PowerPoint presentation where I was going through charts and like returns and like potential income long term.
I know, but in
situations.
in the back of your mind, you were just like, please let her say yes. Just
sort of.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. Because I knew I wouldn't be able to do it without her support. So we had to both be on board. Otherwise, it just wasn't. It just would have stayed a part-time, gig.
Yeah, I understand. I think, like you said, I think everybody who's gone full time, if they've had a wife or significant other, has had to go through that conversation and be like, okay, look, it'll be fine. I know this is very terrifying, and honestly, going back to the first part of this podcast, when I published Alpha World 8, Alpha World's been my longest running series and also my most profitable series. And I just set that down and went, we're done.
Yeah.
And I start thinking about it, and I'm going to put out the first book of a new series, and I'm thinking, I really hope people like it. I don't want to go back to working for other people again.
Oh, I know. I have the same feeling like anytime I put in a new series or book where it's like, man, I hope this does well. I really like working for myself. I don't think I can go back to working for anyone else again. I was like, yeah.
Well, see, that was probably actually the nice thing about the short story. So when I put them out, is I got that taste of just nothing happening. That, oh my God, they've caught on. I'm a fraud. Nobody likes my work anymore. And I had that real panic of, oh God, what does this mean? I'm going to have to go back and get a 9-to-5 job or a midnight shift job at a convenience store or something just to make the bills.
Right.
Which I've passed the panic, and I hope it never comes back. But at least I've had that moment of just absolute terror. So I understand what that feeling is really going to feel like if it ever happens again.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you put like 2 or 3 months of work into this novel, and so like if something doesn't hit right away, that you're going to be out of income for 2 or 3 more months. on top of that. So like potentially if you have multiple failures, it's like, oh, that's like half a year of like little to no income from this writing thing. And that even if you have like a nice nest egg saved up for rainy days, that'll eat through it real quick. And so like, yeah,
Yeah, as well as one of the things that was agreed upon when I became a full time writer is we had what was at the time 2 years worth of expenses as a nest egg, um, which has been nibbled at here or there because of other life reasons.
right.
But that nest egg is kind of a necessity for those reasons. The nice thing is I've also gone from like when I was working full time, a book every 4 or 3.5 months now to where I'm pushing to a book every 6 to 7 weeks.
Yeah, like once every two months, I think is what I.
Well, I'm trying to, like I said, I'm trying to
Yeah.
narrow it down to like every 6 weeks. So every month and a half, I should be able to put a book out,
Right.
which would let me do that rotation of Resurrection Quest, AG, Binding Words, and then one whatever,
Right.
and get 2 books for at least each series out every year. So those people who only enjoy Binding Words or only like Apocalypse Gates don't feel like they're waiting a year and a half for the next book that they want.
Right. No, yeah, I understand. Like I know that you are able to put at a bigger pace than me, which I'm always admiring of. A couple comments from the chat room says, Jamie Harrington says, hey, Ramon, you ever think about doing a Twitch channel? I wish you would so I could toss you a monthly free Amazon Prime subscription. Didn't know that was a thing. I'm aware of Twitch, just not the benefits, I guess, of it.
You have to be a Twitch affiliate, I think is what it's called, which means you need so much what is it, viewers and stuff on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can do that, then like the Twitch Prime shows up and the other things that you get money out of show up. And Twitch Prime, everybody who's got Amazon Prime gets a free Twitch Prime where they can give that donation, as it were, that boost to a Twitch channel of their choice. So it would be, in a way, free-ish money, but that would be up to you. It also, I think, would mean that since it is live videos, you would need to either do some kind of Twitch streaming, whether that's you do the podcast live instead of record it,
yeah,
or doing video games once a week or something just to pull in the viewers so you could do it. But since you're doing the podcast anyway,
that'll probably be the easiest way. I would just hit the stream button like I did now. Just go to Twitch instead of Facebook or something.
I could see where it would where it could be an extra little boost for you.
Yeah,
especially with as many people use you to catch the latest news, reviews, and author interviews.
Right. I've done a few of the shows live, and I have it's already set up as a system to go through live, like the different pictures and backgrounds. I have a background up right now for people who are watching. Music's already set up to stream through OBS, so it wouldn't be too hard of a thing, but I'd never thought of it before. So thank you, Jamie Harrington, for the suggestion. Also, Derek Rain says he'd be interested in watching an interview with Michael Scott Earl. I think that would be very fun, entertaining, and informative video. Sure, possibility if he wishes to do so. He's kind of off on his own thing, in his own situation, publishing on his own now, not outside of the Amazon platform. And he's at a really good Kickstarter. So I think it passed $50,000, I think, at this point.
Well, yeah, in the first 3 hours, actually.
Yeah. First 3 hours it funded. And he had initially goal of $15,000. And I think it's past the $50,000 mark now. So he's raised quite a bit of money now. For that particular project.
Your interviews, isn't that normally also the author coming to you and begging and pleading to do an interview with you? Not so much you going to the author and saying, hey, buddy, let's do an interview together?
I haven't had to ask anybody in a long time, but there are always people who are like, oh, I love your work. Do you want to do this thing? And they're like, yeah, sure, why not? And I don't think anybody's ever said no to me. It's just a matter of like scheduling, because a lot of the
I'm totally going to click off that box next time.
Yeah, so there you go.
If you ever ask me again, I'm totally saying no just to make sure that I am that guy.
They're like, oh, only one dude has said no to me, and he's bald and with a beard, and like, oh, they're like, Charles? I'm like, oh, no, the other guy.
The other bald bearded author. The guy with glasses. Yeah, that's still Charles.
Yeah.
No, the other.
They're like, no, the guy's who's kind of mean to you, and he's a jerk. I'm like, so no, okay.
Still Charles?
Yeah. So many boxes. I know so many bearded people who, who have.
Me and Charles have a lot of the same boxes now that I think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Bald, glasses, bearded. Mean to Ramon has done live chat. Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
check a lot of those
I think at
boxes.
Dragon Con we were confused, like who's cosplaying who? Is it Daniel cosplaying Charles or Charles is cosplaying
I'm
Daniel?
I'm trying to get a shirt that says "Wife, bring me a beer"
Uh
for next year, so I can definitively say that I am cosplaying Charles then.
that'd be good. I think he
So
had pictures of like bacon on it too.
probably in the background, probably be
Yeah.
cross strips of bacon.
Bacon. Yeah. That actually, I think that'll work. So if he's watching, he can comment and chat about it. And if he's not, I think he's probably asleep by now, though. He likes to sleep in the middle of the day.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, me either. So there we go. Derek also asks in chat, how popular is Binding Words? He's mentioned that Alpha World was your top seller series. How has Binding Worlds been? That one's the Portal Fantasy one.
That is Portal Fantasy. That is it's good. I mean, it's not Alpha World levels of sales.
Right.
Honestly. But it's good. It pays the bills. That and Apocalypse Gates run pretty evenly, honestly, for sales and stuff. I think I get probably a couple more sales for Binding Words than KU reads. I find that I get way more KU reads for AG, and I think that's just people not wanting it attached to their Amazon account. So
Right. No, hey, that makes sense to me. If you don't want your wife ringing the bell saying, "Oh, thank you for your purchase of the so and so," I'm like, okay.
that's all I could think of is people reading it on the slides, so they don't have to answer any unfortunate questions from people.
That definitely is. I mean, then, honestly, when you said that the game mechanics in the new one are a little more hidden away on the actual, I was like, is it going to be like Binding Words, or is it going to be more like? It was like, oh man, I'm like,
No,
okay, I'll read it.
Binding Words is straight Portal Fantasy,
Yeah,
and
I know.
there's no game mechanics behind it.
I
The
know.
only game-esque element to Binding Words is how Sean views what he can do with the world.
I know. Like I
And
said,
it's only referenced here or there.
yeah, I know. That's all. Like
So
in my heart, I like worry like, oh, I'm gonna read this. I'm hoping. I'm I'm rooting for you. I'll say that. So I'm like, okay. I hope it does well.
so do I.
I do too.
Honestly, I really hope it does well.
Yeah, because if it's gonna replace software, like, oh, that's a big transition.
That is a huge bar to climb, honestly, for my fan base, especially since, like I said, it deviates so much from what I am supposedly known for.
Yes.
With the romance and harem.
Right. But I mean, there are other things you are known for in the good writing, your good storytelling, and your intricate emotional moments in your stories. And I think if you continue on with that, in addition to, I don't know, improved action adventure, that's going to continue on in your stories. I hope you would do well. I hope your fans will continue to continue. I mean, I plan to.
That's always the hope. And the fun thing with Resurrection Quest, like you said, is the combat moments, because it's tabletop combat, but it's not sequenced.
So it's not turn-based.
It's not turn-based. It's not the players aren't like standing there frozen, like, okay, hey, Dick, when you go next time, you should totally cast Fireball here while we all stand here waiting for you to do it.
Right.
It's a real world that just has game mechanics behind everything.
Right. So fantasy RPG world. So with tabletop mechanics, and that's a whole genre that there's several stories who do that kind of stuff. And they do a lot of them have the same Portal Fantasy kind of setup that you would get from like 1980s books, where they're like, oh, we all know the mechanics, but they're not necessarily shown the same way we would see character sheets and stuff, the same way you would in like other kind of LitRPG stories. So, but they all try to sneak them in different ways, partially like the way you're doing it, where you're like, oh yeah, they know it in their minds and their backgrounds, but the reader's not necessarily going to see them the same way we see notifications from MMO, kind of LitRPG stories. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, no bright blue boxes floating with information in front of them.
Not that you couldn't do it, guys. If you're writing your own thing, you feel free to do that if that's what you want to do. That's not necessarily a trope of tabletop fantasy RPG.
No, it's a trope of LitRPG though, by and large, if you think about it. And I love, it hasn't happened in a while. Occasionally you get the threads on one of the Facebook pages of why is this a thing? And I feel very old when that happens, because, that harkens all the way back to the first Final Fantasy on the Nintendo, and then it makes me feel my age, and I feel sad.
No, I understand what you're saying. Like I felt the same way. I'm like, yeah, it's you either get it or you don't. So I'm like, okay. If you don't, because that's one of the things I found about advertising for the podcast. Like, I kind of have to advertise what LitRPG is in the first place, and then I'm like, oh, and by the way, I have a podcast about that to try to sell them on like looking at the show or the Facebook page. I'm like, oh yeah, gotta sell LitRPG first before they'll try the podcast. I'm like, oh, double sales.
Yep.
So there you go. So was there anything else you want to talk about? I feel like we talked for about at least an hour and 7 minutes. So I feel like that's a good, nice conversation that we've had.
No, I think it's good.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like particularly long. We've hit all the points I think you wanted to talk about. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss or talk about? I mean, talk about the contest. Yeah, you got all your stuff. And again, the big thing is that you have your new series coming out, Greenway Goblins, Resurrection Quest, book number 1 out on October the 15th. So not that long from now.
That's it. That's all I can think of. I mean, we talked Alpha World. We talked how it is to be a writer for 3 years and the existential crisis of, oh my gods, people are going to hate me forever. And we talked the new series. I think that's everything.
Okay.
I mean, outside of the fact that you still have all your hair, you bastard, you.
Yes. As I'm getting old, I don't plan to lose my hair, but Genetic says I have a pretty good chance. My dad still has his hair. He's oddly thinner than me, though. So I'm like,
hang on. Your mother's father.
If I'd ever met him, I have no idea. I've never met that guy. So
they say hairline comes from your mother's father. So
that's anecdotal evidence at best.
At the moment, I'd say you're looking okay in that regard.
There we go. So that's where I'm hoping. Even if I went bald, I don't think I would look terrible. I've shaved my hair before, and I don't think but I guess I'm the wrong person to ask. I'd have to ask my wife how I looked without hair, and that would be a much more honest answer, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you want to walk down that road.
Yeah, not yet. Okay. So anyways, thank you everybody for hanging out. Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to hit the music for the end credits, and we'll see how that goes. So you want to dance along with me?
Oh, no, I don't dance, sir. I always think it's a fun way to end the show, just to relax. Well, you got to be loose. You got a child to take care of and words to write.
That's it. Music is ending. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for hanging out.